The first gunshot shattered the midnight silence. Just as Elijah Crowe realized, the tall Apache woman wasn't running toward him, she was running for her life. The desert night swallowed sound strangely in this part of the Arizona frontier, where the high mesas created pockets of windless darkness and the moon barely lit the earth. But that gunshot, that was close. Too close. Elijah lowered the lantern he had been using to fix the broken hinge on his cabin door and squinted toward the outline of the ridge. Another shadow then. Another. Someone was chasing her. Elijah wasn't the type to stick his nose in other people's business. Not anymore. Not after the army, not after the betrayal, not after that winter in Montana that had nearly broken him. He had carved out this remote life to avoid being entangled in anyone's danger, sorrow, or sins. But when the woman stumbled into the clearing and the lantern light revealed her face, fierce, terrified, and proud even in desperation, Elijah felt something sharp and old rise in him. She was tall. Taller than most women he'd seen, with long black hair braided with beads of turquoise and bone. Her clothes were torn, her breath ragged, her hands bound at the wrists by coarse rope. She didn't speak at first. She didn't have to. A third gunshot tore the night open. Elijah blew out the lantern. "Get inside," he whispered. She hesitated long enough for him to see the spark in her eyes, the kind that weighed risk and pride together. Before choosing survival, then she ran into his cabin. Elijah slammed the door and dropped the heavy bar. He could hear distant hoofbeats now. 3 riders, maybe 4. Moving fast, he turned toward her, gripping the rifle he never thought he'd need again. "Name?" he whispered. She pressed her back against the wall, panting. "Nascha," she said softly, voice deep and steady despite the terror chasing her. "Daughter of Chief Tahóma of the Red Knife people." Elijah exhaled sharply. The Red Knife Apache were feared even in the farthest ranch towns. They guarded their lands fiercely and punished trespassers without hesitation. But they didn't tie up their own daughters with rope. Elijah stepped closer and cut the bindings at her wrists. "Who's after you?" Before she could answer, a bullet gouged a splinter from the cabin door. Nascha flinched, but she didn't cry out. Elijah dragged her behind the stone hearth. "Stay down." Another gunshot followed, then a rough voice outside yelled, "We know she went in there, Crowley. Hand her over and we'll leave you breathing." Elijah's jaw tightened. He recognized that voice. Ephraim Dern, ranch thief, gun hawk, and professional coward. He'd been seen days earlier in town bragging about a big job out east near Apache territory. Elijah's blood chilled. If Ephraim had chased Nascha across miles of desert, if she was the daughter of a chief, if she had escaped, this wasn't small trouble. This was wildfire trouble. Nascha's hand touched his sleeve, gentle but urgent. "Please," she whispered. "If they take me back, I will not live till morning." Elijah wasn't a hero. He never had been. He'd spent most of his 38 years avoiding the kind of fights that left no one satisfied and everyone wounded. But something in Nascha's eyes' raw determination, unbroken spirit, made him realize that fate had dragged her to his cabin for a reason. "Stay down," he said again. Pulling his hat low, he moved to the window, lifting the curtain just an inch. Moonlight glinted off rifled barrels, 3 men, maybe a 4th hidden in the shadows. Ephraim stood in the center, pistol drawn, grin wide. Elijah cracked open the window and fired a warning shot not at the men, but into the dirt between them. "I don't want a shootout tonight," Elijah called. "Right on." Ephraim laughed, a sharp, grating sound. "That woman is worth a fortune, Crowley. The men who hired us want her alive. We get paid if she breathes, but we don't have to guarantee the same for you." Elijah's stomach clenched. This wasn't just kidnapping. Someone wanted leverage against her father. And anyone who dared attempt that would be ruthless. Enough to kill every witness. The danger grew teeth in Elijah's mind. He had only one option. He chambered another. Round. You fire one more bullet at this cabin, he shouted. And you'll be digging graves before dawn. A tense silence followed. Then Ephraim growled. Have it your way. Hoofbeats thundered away into the desert. Nascha exhaled shakily behind him. They will come back. With more men. I know, Elijah said that she met his gaze. Then why protect me? Because your eyes looked like someone who hadn't been given a choice. He wanted to say, because every path I've taken these last years has led to emptiness. Maybe this one means something. Because no one should die alone in the desert, with no one to stand beside them. But he only said, because I don't let cowards decide who gets to live. Nascha looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. Elijah poured her a cup of water and stoked the fire. She drank slowly, hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. He noticed the raw marks around her wrists, the swollen bruise on her temple, the cuts on her arms where mesquite thorns had torn her skin. How far did you run? He asked. Since the sun fell behind the mountains, she whispered. I escaped when they slept. They followed the moment I touched open ground. Why'd they take you? She stared into the flames for several long moments. My father refused a treaty with a mining company, she said finally. They want the silver beneath our sacred ridge. They think forcing him to sign by threatening me will break him. Elijah felt anger tighten in his chest. So they hired Ephraim Dern and his scum to kidnap you. Yes. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows that danced across her face. For a moment, Elijah forgot the danger outside. He saw only a strong woman carrying the weight of an entire tribe on her shoulders, despite the fear she tried to hide. What happens now? She asked quietly. Elijah didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the window, toward the desert that stretched for miles. Ephraim would return. Probably before dawn. And if he brought hired guns with him, Elijah's cabin would become a coffin. He needed a plan. He needed to get Nascha somewhere safe. But where? The nearest town was 2 days' ride. Her tribe was farther still. And Ephraim would surely have men along every trail. Elijah rubbed his jaw. You can rest till first light. Then we move. Nascha hesitated. You would come with me? For tonight, he said. I don't leave a woman to be hunted. Her gaze softened, just barely. Hours passed in silence after that. Nascha slept lightly near the fire, one hand resting against her knife, the only weapon she'd kept. Elijah sat near the door, rifle across his knees, listening to every creak, every shift of wind, every distant coyote cry. His heartbeat stayed uneasy, like a drum preparing for war. Just before dawn, he heard it, hoofbeats again. Slow this time, heavy. Not Ephraim's wild riders, someone older, someone unhurried, someone who knew they didn't need to rush to get what they wanted. Nascha stirred awake. What is it? Elijah stood. Horse approaching. A lone silhouette appeared in the pale morning light, a tall rider on a black horse, moving with quiet purpose. As he drew closer, Elijah felt a strange shift in the air. The kind that came before storms or revelations. Nascha stiffened. She rose slowly to her feet, eyes wide with disbelief. Elijah. Her voice trembled for the first time. That is my father. Elijah's pulse kicked hard. Chief Tahóma, leader of the Red Knife Apache, one of the most feared men in the Southwest, was riding straight toward his cabin. The old chief dismounted, his expression carved from stone. Without a word, he stepped onto Elijah's porch and looked him dead in the eyes. You sheltered my daughter, he said in a deep, resonant voice. "And for that, you have my respect." Elijah exhaled in relief, but Tahóma's next words froze him solid. "By sunrise, this cabin belongs to me." Elijah blinked. "What?" The chief stepped closer, towering, intimidating, ancient as the desert. "You saved her. So now her future must be tied to yours. My tribe's law is clear. Any man who risks his life for the chief's daughter must become part of her path." He pointed at Elijah's cabin. "This home is now her dowry, and you are now responsible for her protection." Elijah stared in stunned silence. Nascha stared too, equally shocked, and the sun rose behind them, lighting the desert in blood-red gold. The real trouble had only just begun. The moment Elijah stepped outside, the cold sunrise wind cut across the clearing like a warning. Tahóma stood rigid beneath the growing light, his long gray hair stirring like smoke, his dark eyes fixed on Elijah with a mix of judgment and certainty. Elijah didn't bow. He didn't look away either. "With respect, Chief," he said softly, "I never asked for your daughter's dowry." Nascha stepped between them, breath unsteady as she tried to make sense of her father's declaration. "Father, Elijah saved me, yes, but you cannot just—" Tahóma raised one hand, silencing her instantly. "Our laws do not bend, daughter. A life saved is a life bound." "I didn't save her to own her," Elijah said, voice tightening. "I saved her because scum like Ephraim shouldn't get to decide anyone's fate." "Elijah," Nascha whispered. Her tone conflicted, as if torn between pride and a strange new fear. Tahóma reached down to the earth, scooping a handful of dust and letting it fall. "The land remembers debts, Elijah Crowe. You owe my people nothing, but we owe you everything for keeping her alive. And under our ways, that bond transfers her path. And the place where she was protected." His gaze flicked to the cabin. "Your cabin is now part of her dowry. She stays. You stay. You protect her until the threat is dead." Elijah felt the weight of those words crush him. He glanced at Nascha. Her eyes were wider, softer, almost pleading for him not to break whatever ceremony had been invoked. "There's more," Elijah said quietly. "Ephraim and his men will come back." They weren't done. Tahóma's jaw flexed. "I know. They hunted her through the night. I tracked them from the ridge." "Then you know there's more than 3. Elijah said, double quotes, "yes. They have hired hands north of the canyon." Tahóma looked toward the horizon as if he could see them even now. "They will return, stronger." Nascha stepped closer to Elijah. "My father believes you will stand with us." Elijah took a slow breath, torn between instinct and responsibility. "I'll protect you," he said finally, voice steady. "But the cabin doesn't belong to anyone but me. I built it with my hands. Every beam, every hinge, every stone in that chimney." Tahóma studied him, expression unreadable. A man speaks with pride about what he builds. "That is good." The chief stepped forward until they were almost chest to chest. "But pride will not keep those men from burning this place to ash." He turned to Nascha. "Gather your things. We ride in 1 hour." Nascha blinked. "Ride? Where?" "To the canyon pass," Tahóma said. "Your mother's brother and 10 warriors are waiting. We regroup, then we plan." Elijah's stomach tightened. "If we leave now, Ephraim could already be watching the trail." "We will not take the trail," Tahóma replied calmly. "We ride through the dry wash under the cliffs. No one watches the snake's path but the snake." Nascha nodded respectfully. Though she cast Elijah one more look full of something he couldn't yet name, while Tahóma walked toward his horse, Elijah leaned in slightly to her. "Are you all right with this?" Nascha hesitated. "My father is fierce, but not cruel." She looked at the cabin door, where she had wrested safety for the first time since her capture. He believes our destinies cross for a reason. Do you believe that? Elijah asked quietly. She held his gaze longer than before. I believe last night would have ended in darkness if you hadn't opened that door. Elijah swallowed, unsure what to do with the warmth that rose in his chest at her words. Inside the cabin, Elijah packed quickly: ammunition, water, jerky, a second blanket, and the rifle he had kept hidden under the floorboards. He paused before covering the little wooden carving above the hearth, an eagle his brother had made years ago before the war took him. The only thing Elijah had left from family. He slid it into his bag. When he stepped outside again, Nascha was fastening the saddle on his horse, her movements practiced and strong. She wore a clean strip of cloth around her wrist where the rope had burned her the night before. The firelight of dawn brushed her features with an almost otherworldly glow. Tahóma watched them from atop his black horse. We move. They set off through the dry wash. The sun climbed higher, flooding the desert with a harsh brightness that made every shadow look like a threat. Elijah rode near Nascha, his eyes scanning the ridges. After nearly an hour of silence, Nascha spoke softly. You do not ask many questions. I've learned most answers hurt, he said, and yet you rode with us. Her voice carried a hint of admiration. Many men would not. I'm not many men, Elijah said. She looked at him, studying him as if trying to read truths beneath his scars. What did your life hold before this place? He exhaled slowly. A war that didn't need fighting. A family I couldn't save. His eyes narrowed at the horizon. And now a cabin that might not survive the week. Nascha softened. If my father takes it, he does not mean to disrespect you. Our people share what keeps us alive. Cabins aren't meant to be shared. That depends, she said gently, on who shares it. Something in her tone made Elijah's heartbeat shift. A quiet thud in his chest he wasn't prepared for. Before he could respond, Tahóma raised a hand. They stopped instantly. Elijah reached for his rifle, scanning the cliffs. What is it? He whispered. Tahóma didn't answer. He dismounted, crouched, and brushed his fingers across the sand. Horse tracks. Fresh, very fresh. Elijah, Tahóma said quietly, you were right. Ephraim's men had already passed through here. Maybe minutes ago. Nascha's breath quickened. They are ahead of us? Or circling back, Elijah muttered. Either way, they know this area better than I thought. Tahóma stood sharply. We press on, but stay low. Move. They moved quickly, weaving through narrow sandstone corridors until the canyon opened into a small basin of red earth and tall rock walls. A whistle sounded sharp. Hi, unmistakably Apache. Nascha relaxed instantly. Our people. A group of warriors emerged from the shadows. 10 men, strong, leather-armored, painted for war. The tallest among them stepped forward, Nascha's uncle, Judahi. His eyes flicked over Elijah with curiosity and caution. You brought the stranger, Judahi said to Tahóma. He saved Nascha, Tahóma replied. He stays with us. Some of the warriors exchanged silent looks, not hostile, but wary. Elijah kept his rifle lowered, though his instincts stayed sharp. Nascha approached her uncle and hugged him, relief softening her shoulders for the first time. Elijah watched the moment quietly, feeling like an outsider invading something sacred. Judahi turned to him. If you protect my niece, we honor you. But if you bring trouble, trouble already exists, Elijah said, and it's coming for all of us. Judahi's eyes narrowed. Explain. Elijah stepped forward, aware that every warrior watched his movements. The men who took Nascha aren't just kidnappers. They're hired guns. Someone paid them enough silver to risk a war with your people. Tahóma added, the miners. Judahi stiffened. Then they will not stop. No, Elijah said. They won't. Not until they get her back. or until they're dead. Before more could be said, a distant thunder broke over the canyon. Not thunder. Hooves. Lots of them. Nascha's face drained of color. They found us. The warriors snapped into motion instantly, taking positions atop boulders, knocking arrows, readying rifles taken from past battles. Elijah unslung his own weapon, checking the chamber. Tahóma grabbed his spear. Judah, take half the men to the north wall. Elijah, stay with Nascha. Elijah nodded, but the ground vibrated harder now. Dust rose. Echoes grew louder. Ephraim's voice cracked through the canyon like a whip. Tahóma! Hand over the girl, and maybe I'll let the rest of you see tomorrow. Nascha's breath hitched. Elijah stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. Stay behind the rocks. Don't move. She touched his arm, gripping tighter than she intended. Elijah, don't die. He almost smiled. Not planning to. The first gunshots erupted, ricocheting off the canyon walls. War had come, and Elijah realized, with a cold certainty settling in his bones, that saving Nascha at midnight had been the easy part. The real fight, the one that could cost them everything, was just beginning. Gunfire cracked through the canyon like a storm made of metal. Elijah dove behind a slab of rock as bullets shattered the sandstone above his head, spraying him with dust. Warriors took up positions along the ridge, sending arrows and scattered rifle shots down toward the riders below. The smell of gunpowder burned the air, mixing with the sharp tang of the desert morning. Nascha crouched behind him, her breath shallow but controlled. Elijah could feel the tension of her fear not for herself but for her people, for her father, for him. Ephraim's men poured into the basin like wolves crashing into a camp. There were more than Elijah expected, maybe 15, all armed, all ruthless. Ephraim rode at the front on a gray stallion, his coat flapping behind him, his pale hair catching the light like silver wire. His eyes were cold, calculating, too calm for the chaos he commanded. Elijah. Tahóma's voice thundered from the ridge. They will flank from the south. Cut them off. Elijah didn't hesitate. He grabbed Nascha's wrist, pulling her to her feet. Stay behind those rocks near the wall, he ordered. Don't move until I say. She caught his arm. No, I fight with you. He met her eyes, fierce and unyielding. You're the one they want. Your place is staying alive. Something inside her wavered, pride or anger or both, but she nodded. Elijah sprinted low, weaving between boulders as bullets chased him, kicking up dirt at his heels. Two riders broke from the pack, heading toward the south opening. Elijah slid behind a stone pillar, raised his rifle, and squeezed the trigger. One rider toppled instantly. The second swerved, firing wildly. Elijah rolled to the right, lined up another shot, and dropped him before the horse even slowed. The canyon echoed with shouts, hooves, gunshots, and the cold clarity of death's shadow. Judah and the warriors unleashed a volley of arrows from the ridge, striking 3 more riders. But Ephraim's men were relentless. They dismounted and used the terrain for cover, firing upward to keep the warriors pinned. Hold the ridge. Judah shouted. Do not let them climb. Elijah pressed his back against a rock, breathing hard. The air felt thin. The battle wasn't going their way. Ephraim's men were trained, coordinated, and ruthless. They'd boxed the Apache forces into the canyon, narrowing their escape routes. A low whistle cut through the battle, a call Elijah didn't recognize. He peeked over the rock and froze. Ephraim himself was dismounting. He raised a white handkerchief. Tahóma! He shouted, voice booming through the basin. Let's talk this like men. Tahóma didn't answer at first. The canyon held its breath. Then Tahóma stepped forward atop the ridge, silhouette carved against the blazing sky. Your words are poison, he growled. And poison kills. Ephraim smirked. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and you're protecting something that doesn't concern you. It concerns me, Tahóma replied. Everything concerning my daughter concerns me. Ephraim's smile widened. Good. Then let's discuss the terms before more of your people die. His tone turned icier. Hand over Nascha, alive and uninjured. That's all I ask. Over my dead body, Elijah muttered under his breath. Ephraim glanced toward the rocks where Nascha hid. He couldn't see her, but Elijah felt the chill of his suspicion. Crowley! Ephraim barked suddenly. I know you're down there. Come out. Let's end this. Elijah stiffened. He hadn't expected to be recognized like an old acquaintance. Crowley. Nascha whispered from behind the rocks, Do not go. Elijah exhaled, jaw tightening. I have to. He stepped from cover, rifle lowered, but ready. He walked across the dusty basin, every eye on him, the heat pressing against his skin. Ephraim watched him approach, hands resting casually on the handles of his two pistols. Elijah Crowley, Ephraim drawled. I thought you'd be dead by now. Not today, Elijah growled. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Ephraim said. Stealing what doesn't belong to you. She doesn't belong to you either, Elijah fired back. Ephraim's smile sharpened like a blade. I paid for her. Elijah's stomach turned. You paid men to kidnap an innocent woman. I paid for insurance, Ephraim corrected. Her tribe is blocking my mining operations. I needed leverage now. He spread his arms. I have half the warriors in this canyon cornered, and I still hold the bargaining chip. She's not yours, Elijah said again, louder now, voice echoing. She never was. Ephraim tilted his head. You're attached to her, aren't you? Look at you. The loner in a cabin, playing hero. How did that feel, Elijah? Having someone depend on you again? Did it fill that empty house of yours? Elijah felt heat crawl up his spine. Ephraim was baiting him. And it was working. Tahóma stepped forward on the ridge, spear leveled. Enough. Elijah is under my protection. My daughter owes him her life. That's the problem, Ephraim replied lazily. She owes him. She belongs to him now, by your laws. You see how destructive your customs are? The canyon stirred, the tension was shredding the air. Ephraim took a slow step toward Elijah. You could walk away, Crowley. I'll let you live. Give me the girl. Let the tribe starve out or surrender. You get your cabin. You get your peace. His voice dropped. Just hand her over. Elijah lifted his rifle slightly. I won't. You sure? Ephraim whispered. One woman for the lives of all these people? She's not one woman, Elijah snapped. She's their future. And she's the only person who looked me in the eye in years like I wasn't a ghost. Ephraim paused, taken aback, just long enough. Elijah raised the barrel and fired. The bullet grazed Ephraim's arm, spinning him backward. His men shouted, firing wildly. Elijah dove for cover, rolling behind a fallen log just as a hail of bullets ripped through where he'd stood. The canyon exploded into chaos. Again, Nascha ran from her hiding place, ignoring Elijah's earlier command. She slid beside him, bow in hand. You should not have gone alone. I told you to stay. I choose when I stay, she snapped. And when I fight. They crouched together, firing on Ephraim's men as they advanced. Two riders tried to flank from the east ridge, but Tahóma speared one with impossible precision, sending him tumbling from his horse. Judah shot the second before he could reload. Warriors poured arrows into the basin, but the gunfire from Ephraim's gang was stronger, louder, drowning the canyon in thunder. Elijah, Nascha said breathlessly. We cannot hold them. I know. We must escape. We can't lead them out of the canyon. There's only one way north wall. Her eyes widened. The narrow pass? It's the only exit they can't easily cross. Nascha nodded. Then we run. They scrambled across the battlefield, keeping low as bullets sparked against the rocks beside them. Elijah spotted Ephraim through the smoke bandaging his arm, eyes burning with fury. Ephraim saw them and screamed to his men, "Don't let them reach the pass." Tahóma shouted from the ridge, "Go, Nascha!" "Elijah, guard her." Elijah grabbed Nascha's wrist and pulled her through a cluster of rock spires. The narrow pass loomed ahead, a slit between two towering sandstone walls, barely wide enough for two people. Gunshots chased them. Sand sprayed their heels. Nascha gasped, "Elijah, hurry!" They reached the pass just as Ephraim's men closed in behind them. Elijah turned, fired twice, dropping one man and forcing the others to take cover. "Run!" Elijah shouted. "Get deeper into the pass." But Nascha hesitated. Looking back through the dust and chaos, Tahóma was still fighting. Her people were still trapped. "Elijah, my father." Elijah grabbed her shoulders. "He told me to protect you. If you go back, we lose everything." Tears glimmered in her eyes, fear, rage, love for her people all colliding. "Elijah, I cannot leave him." "You're not leaving him," Elijah said fiercely. "We're surviving for him." Ephraim's voice cut through the canyon like a blade. "Crowley, I'm coming for you." Elijah spun, fired another round, and dragged Nascha deeper into the shadows of the pass. Behind them, Ephraim's gang regrouped ahead of them. The narrow corridor twisted into darkness between the two. Everything they cared about hung in the balance. The night hung heavy over Red Mesa, the dark sky cracked open by thin streaks of lightning far in the distance. A storm was forming somewhere beyond the ridge, but the land itself was still too still. Elijah felt it the moment he stepped outside Nascha's lodge, the cold brushing against the back of his neck as if warning him something unseen had shifted in the air inside. Nascha slept curled beneath a woven blanket. Ephraim slept near the outer wall, close to the doorway, always guarding even when exhausted. And Tahóma? Tahóma paced outside, watching the horizon with narrowed eyes. Elijah approached him quietly and stopped beside him. "You feel it too?" Tahóma said without looking at him. "Yeah," Elijah replied. "Like something bad is crawling its way toward us." Tahóma nodded once. Tracks were found west of the dunes. Not animals, horses, many. Elijah's jaw tightened. "The raiders. They returned sooner than expected," Tahóma said. His voice was low, but his muscles were wound tight. Ephraim's scouts counted at least 8 riders. Maybe more hiding in the shadows. 8? Elijah whispered. "That's more than we handled last time. More desperate men, more driven by greed," Tahóma said. "Word is finally spreading about the gold mines beyond the dry gorge. Raiders want to claim them first." Elijah exhaled slowly. "You think they're coming for Nascha?" Tahóma turned finally, and his eyes, dark, steady, unshaken, held Elijah's. "They will come for everything. The girl, the elders, the medicine bundles, the land itself. Men like them want all they can take and kill anyone in the way." Lightning flashed again beyond the sands. "We need to wake Ephraim," Elijah said. "We will," Tahóma murmured, "but not yet. I will speak to the council first." He stepped away toward the elders' lodge, leaving Elijah standing alone in the cold. Elijah's hands curled into fists at his side. He hated that this world kept punishing the people who least deserved it. After everything Nascha had survived, losing her home, the winter trek, the ambush, she finally had found some safety. And now that safety was cracking apart again, he turned and quietly entered the lodge. Nascha's eyes opened instantly. She always slept lightly. "You're troubled," she said, her voice soft. Elijah knelt beside her. "I didn't want to wake you." "But something woke you," she said. She pushed herself up, blanket falling from her shoulders. "Tell me." "We found tracks," Elijah admitted. "Riders heading this way. Raiders most likely." Her breath hitched not in fear, but in anger. She had lived enough life to know the shape of danger. "How soon?" "Before sunrise," Elijah said. Ephraim stirred then, half waking. "What's happening?" Elijah looked over. "We're being hunted again." Ephraim cursed under his breath and scrambled up, fastening his belt and grabbing his rifle. He wasted no time. Nascha stood, tying her long dark hair back with a thin leather cord. Her tribal jewelry, bone beads, and turquoise pieces clinked softly against one another. "I will fight if needed." Elijah reached out, gently touching her arm. "You shouldn't have to." She gave him a steady, unbreaking look. "But I will." Outside, the drums began the low, rhythmic thrum signaling council meeting. Tahóma returned a moment later, his face set in stone. "The elders agree," he announced. "We will not abandon our land. We prepare to defend it." "How many fighters?" Ephraim asked. 20, Tahóma replied. "More will join when the alarm sounds." Elijah blew a sharp breath. 20 was brave, but 20 against raiders with rifles and stolen military gear? It was almost suicide. Because these people fought not for money, not for land deeds, but for survival, for honor, for the spirits of their ancestors. Tahóma's voice cut through Elijah's thoughts. "Elijah, you and Ephraim will take the west trail with me. We'll slow them down at the canyon lip. The village will defend the inner line." Elijah agreed. "Nascha stays here." "No," Nascha said firmly. "I stand with the elders. I will carry medicine. I will help those who fall." Tahóma nodded at her with respect. "Your spirit is strong, Nascha." The group moved with urgency now. Outside, fires were lit, smoke rising into the cold night like signals calling the plains themselves to witness what would come. Warriors painted their faces, tied feathers into their hair, and prepared their horses. Women gathered arrows, bandages, water skins. The entire settlement moved in a silent, synchronized rhythm, one they had perfected over generations of hardship. Elijah fastened his long coat, checked his revolver, and slung his rifle over his shoulder. The coat's hem brushed against the dirt as he walked, reminding him of every harsh winter and every forgotten road that led him here to this land. These people, this woman he'd die for. Ephraim tightened his saddle straps aggressively. "I swear, every time we find a place that almost feels like home, trouble finds us." Elijah gave him a grim smile. "Then we stop running. Tonight we make our stand." The three mounted their horses and rode west with the wind biting their faces. The moon hid behind heavy clouds as if it did not want to witness the violence coming. They reached the canyon ridge just before the raiders did. They hid behind stone pillars, rifles ready. The canyon below was deep, narrow, and perfect for trapping an enemy, but only if the timing was exact. Tahóma knelt, studying the darkness. Minutes passed. Then a faint jingle of metal, a muffled snort of a horse, bootsteps crunching grit. The raiders emerged one by one from the shadows, riding hard across the narrow pass. They were rugged men in mismatched coats, stolen cavalry boots, and wide-brimmed hats. Some had scarves around their mouths. Their saddlebags bulged with stolen supplies. Elijah counted. 8, just as predicted. But behind them, 2 more shadows appeared. 10, Elijah whispered. They brought more. Tahóma lifted his hand, signaling patience. Not yet. The raiders slowed as they entered the narrow throat of the canyon, their voices echoing off the stone. Village is somewhere east. Grab the girl first, she's the key. Chief said the white guy's worth tacking. 2. Elijah's blood turned to fire. Tahóma lowered his hand. Now they sprang from behind the rocks. Elijah fired the first shot, dropping the lead rider instantly. Ephraim hit the second man before he even lifted his rifle. Tahóma's arrows flew like streaks of moonlight, silent, deadly. Panic erupted among the raiders. Ambush! Spread out. But they couldn't. The canyon walls pinned them tight. Gunfire thundered through the narrow gorge. Horses reared. Dust rose in thick clouds. Elijah ducked behind a pillar, reloaded, popped out, fired again. A bullet grazed his shoulder, ripping through fabric but not flesh. He ignored the sting. Ephraim tackled a raider off his horse, slamming him into the gravel. The man swung a knife. Ephraim blocked with his forearm, punched him, and knocked him out cold. Another raider tried to climb the canyon wall to flank them. Tahóma spotted him and sent an arrow straight into his thigh, sending him tumbling back down. But even with the element of surprise, the raiders fought viciously. One aimed at Elijah from a higher angle. Nascha's voice echoed in his mind. "I will fight if needed." And Elijah refused to die tonight. He dove behind a rock, rolled, lifted his rifle, and fired. The raider dropped. After 10 minutes that felt like 40, the gunfire slowed. Then stopped. The canyon fell silent except for the men groaning on the ground. Tahóma rose to his feet first, scanning the bodies. "We hold the canyon," he said, breathing heavily. "But some escaped to the south." Elijah's heart clenched. "South? That path leads toward the village." Ephraim froze. "Nascha." They didn't speak again. They just mounted and rode like fire itself, racing back toward the settlement. When they broke past the ridge, Elijah's stomach twisted. Smoke, torches, shouts. The raiders had attacked the village. From behind, Elijah's horse pounded toward the heart of the chaos. Warriors fought in the snow-dusted clearing, steel clashing against steel, rifles cracking, women dragging the wounded to safety. The scene was a blur of desperation and bravery, but Elijah saw only one thing: Nascha. She stood beside an elder, holding a bow, pulling the string back despite her trembling arms. A raider charged her with a knife. Elijah's voice tore from his throat. "Nascha!" He fired before she could release the arrow. The raider collapsed at her feet. Nascha gasped, her breath shaking as she turned toward him. Relief broke across her face, but behind her, another raider lifted his gun. Tahóma's spear shot through the air and pinned the man to the ground before he could fire. Ephraim rushed in next, tackling another attacker. The final skirmish lasted only minutes. Then the last raider fled into the darkness, disappearing into the desert night. Silence fell. The storm finally broke overhead, releasing a slow curtain of rain. Elijah slid off his horse and ran to Nascha. She threw her arms around his neck, her body trembling, her forehead pressed to his chest. "You came back," she whispered. "I always will," he said. Holding her tight, Ephraim stood nearby, breathing hard, looking at the bodies scattered around, but alive. All of them alive. Tahóma walked slowly, checking on the elders, ensuring everyone was safe. Nascha stepped back and touched Elijah's cheek. "You saved me again." Elijah shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I just helped." She smiled softly. Thunder rumbled above, but the village stayed standing, and so did they. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, casting soft amber light across the battered earth. Smoke drifted upward in tired spirals, the last traces of the long night that had nearly broken them all. Elijah sat on a flat stone near the edge of the ridge, his shirt torn, his arm bandaged, his breath finally steady. He stared down at the place where Ephraim had fallen, one man whose hunger for control nearly consumed an entire people. Nascha approached quietly. "You saved many lives," she said, her voice low, gentle. Elijah shook his head. "I just kept trying not to get killed." She knelt beside him. "You fought like someone who had something to live for." He didn't answer at first. The wind tugged at her long dark hair, and the rising sun painted gold along the edges of her tribal jewelry. Elijah finally exhaled and said, "I thought I'd lost you when the canyon collapsed behind us." "I knew you would not leave me," she whispered. They sat together in silence until footsteps approached. Tahóma stood behind them, leaning slightly on a carved walking stick. His injuries were wrapped and his face held exhaustion, but his eyes still carried that commanding fire. "Elijah," Tahóma said, "the council meets. But I wanted to speak with you alone first." Elijah rose. "If you want me gone, I understand." Tahóma studied him for a long moment. "You stood with us when death closed around my people. You risked everything for my daughter." His voice softened. "You owe us nothing. Yet you gave everything." Nascha stepped forward. "Father, he saved my life more than once." "I know," Tahóma replied, "which is why I ask this with respect. Elijah, what do you want now?" Elijah swallowed hard. "All my life I never belonged anywhere. Not after losing my family. Not after the war. Not out there in the towns. I thought that cabin was the best I'd ever have." He looked at Nascha. "Until she walked into it." Nascha's eyes glistened. Tahóma crossed his arms. "If you wish to stay among us, you will be treated as kin. If you choose to leave, you leave with honor. The decision is yours." Elijah looked over the valley, the scattered fires, the wounded being tended, the surviving children helping rebuild tents. He remembered nights spent alone in silence so heavy it choked him. He remembered the fear of letting anyone close again. But now, "When I fought beside you," Elijah said, "I felt something I haven't felt in years. Purpose. Family. A reason to wake up and try." He met Nascha's gaze. "I want to stay. If you'll have me." Nascha stepped closer until her hand almost brushed his. "I hoped you would say that." Tahóma smiled faintly, something rare and precious. "Then it is done." Before Elijah could respond, a young warrior ran up the ridge, breathless. "Chief Tahóma!" The last of Ephraim's riders, 3 men. They came down the western trail waving a white cloth. They surrendered. "They say Ephraim is dead and they want mercy." Tahóma nodded. "Bring them water. Tend their wounds. The fighting is finished." The warriors sprinted off. Elijah frowned. "You're sparing them?" Tahóma turned to him. They followed a man consumed by greed, but they themselves were not the source of evil. Ending hate begins when someone chooses not to spread it further, Nascha added. "That is our way." Elijah slowly nodded. "Maybe that's a lesson the whole world needs." The 3 stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming the cold scars of the night. When the breeze washed over them, Elijah felt something loosen inside him, something he had carried far too long. Nascha reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Tahóma placed a firm but gentle hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Come, there is food waiting and a future to build." As they walked back toward the village, Elijah felt the weight of loneliness finally slip off his back. The people gathered, greeting him not as an outsider, but as someone who had bled beside them. Children smiled shyly. Elders nodded with respect. Warriors touched his arm in gratitude. Nascha stayed at his side the entire way. Elijah paused at the edge of the camp and looked toward the horizon, the cabin he once thought was his whole world somewhere beyond the distant hills. "Guess I won't be needing that place anymore," he murmured. Nascha squeezed his hand. "Your new home is here." And for the first time in years, Elijah Crowe believed it. The battle was over. The fear was gone. And the man who once lived alone in silence walked into a future filled with firelight, family, and a woman who had changed everything just by surviving the night.